Adriana Velasquez hadn't seen her brother in 22 years when she walked onto the Family Feud stage on May 17, 2024. She was 39 years old, 5'4", a hotel housekeeper from Bakersfield, California, wearing a dress she'd bought at a thrift store on Chester Avenue for $7 because it was the same shade of blue her brother used to wear every Sunday in Tegucigalpa. She didn't tell anyone that. She didn't tell anyone that the silver cross around her neck had belonged to him, or that the photograph folded inside her wallet was so creased from 22 years of handling that his face had nearly disappeared into the fold lines. She played the game. She smiled at Steve Harvey. She answered questions about things you hide from your spouse and things that make you sneeze. She laughed at the right moments. And when the Velasquez family won fast money with 194 points, and Steve announced the $20,000 prize, Adriana covered her face with both hands and sobbed so violently that her cousin Marisol had to hold her upright. Steve thought she was crying about the money. She was not crying about the money. She was crying because she had made a promise to herself in the parking lot before the taping. A promise she'd rehearsed in the bathroom mirror of a Motel 6 at 4 o'clock that morning, that if she won, she would say his name on television. She would say Rafael Alejandro Velasquez on a stage in front of 200 people and millions of viewers, because she had been saying it into silence for 22 years, and nobody had answered. And maybe, just maybe, if she said it loud enough, the silence would break. And then Steve Harvey said 6 words that Adriana Velasquez had spent her entire adult life waiting to hear. "There's someone here to see you." Adriana's legs gave out before she even turned around. But nobody in that studio knew what was about to happen. The Velasquez family lived on a hillside in Colonia Kennedy, one of the poorest neighborhoods in Tegucigalpa, Honduras. Their house was built from cinder block and corrugated tin. It had 2 rooms, one for sleeping, one for everything else. There was no running water on Tuesdays and Thursdays because the municipal system couldn't reach the hillside with consistent pressure. Their father, Ernesto, drove a bus on the Comayagüela route. Their mother, Yolanda, sold baleadas from a cart near the Mercado San Isidro. Adriana was the youngest of 4. Oldest brother Carlos, then Rosa, then Rafael, then Adriana. The 4 of them shared one mattress until Carlos turned 15 and started sleeping on a piece of foam on the floor. It wasn't poverty the way Americans understand poverty. It was ordinary. It was every family on that hillside. It was rice and beans, and church on Sunday, and shoes that got passed down until the rubber dissolved and the laces turned gray. Rafael was 3 years older than Adriana. He was her person. That was the only word for it. From the time Adriana could walk, Rafael was the one who held her hand on the path down the hillside to the school at the bottom. He was the one who checked her homework, braided her hair when Yolanda was at the market, taught her to whistle with 2 fingers, and told her every night before bed that she was the smartest person in Colonia Kennedy. He wasn't being kind. He believed it. Adriana was sharp in a way that made her teachers nervous and her mother proud and her father confused. She could multiply 3-digit numbers in her head at 7. She could read faster than any child in her school at 8. Rafael told everyone who would listen that his sister was going to be somebody. He said it the way older brothers say things that are simultaneously a prediction and a command. On June 14, 2002, Rafael Alejandro Velasquez left the house on the hillside at 5 o'clock in the morning. He was 20 years old. He told Yolanda he was going to find work in San Pedro Sula. He hugged Carlos at the door. He kissed Rosa on the forehead. He knelt in front of Adriana, 17 years old, half asleep in the dark kitchen, and pressed his silver cross into her palm. "Hold this until I come back," he said. He walked down the hillside path in the dark. Adriana watched him from the doorway until he disappeared around the bend where the path turned toward the main road. She never saw him take that turn. She just saw the dark close around where he'd been. Rafael did not go to San Pedro Sula. He went north. He crossed the Guatemalan border on foot. He crossed southern Mexico in the back of a freight truck with 19 other people. Somewhere between Arriaga and Ixtepec, in the state of Oaxaca, the truck stopped. The people in the back were told to get out. Rafael got out. After that, nothing. No phone call, no letter, no message relayed through a cousin's friend's contact in Mexico City. No body recovered, no name on a list, no report filed with any agency in any country. Rafael Velasquez walked out of a freight truck in southern Mexico in the summer of 2002 and became, in the language of organizations that track these things, a missing migrant, status unknown. And that wasn't even the part that made Steve cry. Yolanda called everyone she knew. She called relatives in San Pedro Sula who said they'd never seen Rafael. She called a cousin in Guatemala City who asked around and heard nothing. She called a number someone gave her for a shelter in Tapachula, Mexico, that kept records of migrants passing through. They had no record of a Rafael Velasquez. She went to the Honduran Red Cross. She filed a missing persons report. The report was assigned a case number and entered into a system that contained, at that time, over 4,000 similar reports from Honduran families. The Red Cross told Yolanda they would notify her if any information surfaced. No information surfaced. Not that year, not the next, not in 22 years. Adriana held the Silver Cross. She wore it every day. She finished secondary school. She got a job at a garment factory in the Zona Libre that made T-shirts for export. She worked 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, for the equivalent of $43 a month. She saved everything she didn't give to Yolanda. In 2007, when she was 22, she left Honduras the same way Rafael had, north, through Guatemala, through Mexico. She made it. She crossed the border near McAllen, Texas, on a night in October when the temperature was still 94 degrees at midnight. She walked for 11 hours through brush country. She lost a shoe. She kept walking. She made it to a cousin's apartment in Houston, slept for 2 days, and started working, cleaning houses, washing dishes, mopping floors. She moved to Bakersfield in 2010 because someone told her the hotels there were hiring and didn't ask too many questions. She got a job as a housekeeper at a Holiday Inn on Buck Owens Boulevard. She has worked there for 14 years. She makes $14.25 an hour. She sends $300 home to Yolanda every month. She has never missed a month. Every year on June 14th, the anniversary of the day Rafael left, Adriana lit a candle in her apartment and said his name out loud. She said it to the walls. She said it to the ceiling. She said it to the cross around her neck. She told herself that saying his name kept him alive somewhere, even if she couldn't see where. Her co-workers at the hotel didn't know about Rafael. Her neighbors didn't know. The man she dated for 3 years and almost married didn't know, because Adriana had learned that when you tell people your brother disappeared crossing Mexico 20 years ago, they do one of two things. They say, "I'm sorry," in a voice that means the conversation is over, or they say, "Maybe he's still out there," in a voice that means they don't believe it. Adriana couldn't stand either response, so she stopped telling people. She carried Rafael's name the way she carried his cross, close to her body, invisible to everyone else, always present. The audience thought that was the peak. They were wrong. In September 2023, Adriana received a phone call from Rosa in Tegucigalpa. Their mother, Yolanda, had been diagnosed with kidney failure, stage 4. She needed dialysis 3 times a week. The nearest dialysis center was in a hospital 45 minutes from Colonia Kennedy by bus, and the treatment cost, even at the subsidized public hospital rate, was more than Rosa could cover on her seamstress salary. Adriana increased her monthly transfers from $300 to $500. She picked up extra shifts. She cleaned rooms on her days off. She stopped buying anything for herself that wasn't food or bus fare. She ate 1 meal a day at work, whatever the hotel kitchen was going to throw out. She lost 15 pounds in 4 months. In November, Yolanda's condition worsened. The nephrologist told Rosa that a kidney transplant was the only long-term option. The surgery could be performed at Hospital Escuela in Tegucigalpa, but the cost, preoperative testing, surgery, post-operative care, immunosuppressant medications, totaled approximately $62,000. The public insurance program covered 40%. That left $37,000. Adriana did the math on a Holiday Inn notepad with the hotel logo at the top. She did it 4 times. She couldn't make it work. Not at $14.25 an hour. Not with rent at $850. Not with the $500 going home every month. She applied for a personal loan at a credit union in Bakersfield. Denied. Insufficient credit history. She applied at a second lender. Denied. Unable to verify stable employment duration. She applied at a third. Denied. She told Yolanda everything was fine. She told Rosa the money was coming. She told herself she would find a way. She lied to every person she loved because the math wouldn't cooperate, and she couldn't say that out loud because saying it out loud meant admitting that she might lose her mother the way she'd lost her brother. Slowly, invisibly, without ever being able to reach across the distance in time. And then he said something no one was prepared for. Yolanda, during a phone call in January 2024, said something that broke Adriana in a way the math hadn't. She said, "Mija, if God takes me, I'll find Rafael. I'll tell him you never took the cross off." Adriana hung up the phone, walked into the supply closet at the Holiday Inn, and cried for 40 minutes. A coworker named Delia found her and asked what happened. Adriana said, "My mother is dying, and my brother is gone, and I can't fix either one." It was the first time in 17 years she'd said Rafael's name to another person. Delia submitted the Velasquez family for Family Feud the next week. She did it without telling Adriana. She assembled the team: Adriana, Delia standing in as a family friend, Adriana's cousin Marisol from Fresno, Marisol's husband Julio, and Adriana's friend and neighbor Carmen. When they were selected, Adriana said she couldn't afford the time off work. Delia told her the show covered travel. Marisol told her Yolanda would want her to go. Carmen told her to stop arguing. Adriana packed a bag. She packed the thrift store dress because it was the color of Rafael's Sunday shirt. She wore the silver cross. She folded the photograph into her wallet. Steve would later call what happened next the most important moment of his career. What Adriana did not know, what no one in her family knew, was that Delia had included a letter with the Family Feud application. The letter told Rafael's story. A producer read it. That producer contacted the International Committee of the Red Cross. The ICRC contacted its tracing network. A caseworker in Mexico City ran the name Rafael Alejandro Velasquez through a database that hadn't existed in 2002. A consolidated registry of migrants who had been located, detained, hospitalized, sheltered, or resettled across Mexico and Central America over the previous 2 decades. The search returned one result. A man named Rafael A. Velasquez admitted to a hospital in Oaxaca, Mexico in August 2002 with a severe head injury. Discharged after 3 weeks with partial amnesia. Relocated by a local church organization to a small town called San Juan Bautista Tuxtepec, where he had lived for the past 22 years. He worked at a lumber yard. He had no identification. He had no memory of his full name for the first 7 years. By the time fragments returned, Tegucigalpa, a hillside, a sister who could multiply numbers in her head, a silver cross, he had no way to search. No documents, no money, no phone. He told a priest in Tuxtepec that he had a family somewhere. The priest wrote to the Red Cross in 2014. The inquiry was filed. It sat in a regional office for 10 years. It was matched to Yolanda's original missing persons report 6 weeks before the Family Feud taping. The Family Feud production office called Rafael in Tuxtepec. A translator explained who was calling and why. Rafael was silent on the line for over a minute. Then he said one word: Adriana. They flew him to Atlanta. The Velasquez family played against the Morrison family from Charlotte. They played 3 rounds. Steve joked about Julio's mustache. Adriana answered a question about things that come in pairs and said, shoes, and then her face changed for half a second. She was thinking about the shoe she lost in the Texas brush country. But she recovered so fast nobody noticed. The Velasquez family won. Fast money. Adriana and Marisol played. 194 points. $20,000. Confetti. Screaming. Adriana sobbing into her hands. Steve watching her, knowing what was coming, his jaw set, his eyes already full. The confetti was still settling when Steve Harvey walked to center stage. Adriana, he said, I need you to stay right where you are. She looked at him. Her hands were still wet. You've been carrying something for 22 years, Steve said. A cross. A photograph. A name you say out loud every year on June 14th, because you believe that saying it keeps him alive somewhere. Adriana's face went white. Her hand went to the cross at her neck. Marisol grabbed her arm. Carmen stepped closer. Delia, who knew, who had started all of this, was already crying. Steve said, There's someone here to see you. The studio fell completely silent. From behind the set, a man walked out. He was 42 years old. He was thin. He had a scar above his left eyebrow from an injury he couldn't remember receiving. He was wearing a blue shirt, the same shade of blue, the exact same shade. Not because anyone had told him to, but because he had worn blue on Sundays for as long as his broken memory could reach. And he didn't know why until this moment. He was shaking. He stopped 15 feet from Adriana and could not make himself walk closer. Adriana's legs went first, then her voice, then everything. She dropped to the stage floor before anyone could catch her. A sound came out of her that had no language in it, not Spanish, not English, not anything human beings have a word for. It was the sound of 22 years of silence collapsing into a single second. She was on her knees on the Family Feud stage, and she was reaching for a man she hadn't seen since she was 17 years old, standing in a dark kitchen in Colonia, Kennedy. Rafael crossed the 15 feet. He knelt. He took her face in his hands. He said, in a voice so quiet the boom microphone almost lost it, You still have it. He was looking at the cross. The studio fell completely silent for the second time. The crew was crying. Every single one of them. The camera operators, the lighting technicians, the audio engineers, the stage manager who had been pointing at the clock moments ago. A grip named Tony, who had worked on the show for 9 years later, said he put his equipment down and couldn't pick it up again for 10 minutes because his hands wouldn't stop trembling. Steve Harvey was standing 6 feet away with his hand over his mouth. He didn't move for a long time. When he finally walked to them, his voice was barely functional. "Let me tell you something," Steve said. 27 years ago, I was living in my 1976 Ford Tempo. I showered at gas stations. I ate whatever I could find. For 3 years. And the thing that almost destroyed me wasn't the hunger. It wasn't the shame. It was the silence. I had people I loved and I couldn't reach them. I'd dial a number and nobody answered. And I'd sit in that car and wonder if they'd forgotten me. If I'd just disappeared and nobody noticed. Steve looked at Raphael. "You didn't disappear. You were in a lumber yard in a town nobody can pronounce, wearing a blue shirt every Sunday, because somewhere in the part of your brain that the injury couldn't reach, you remembered who you were. That's not lost. That's waiting." But Steve wasn't done. He turned to his producers. "Get me a phone." A producer brought one immediately. Steve dialed a number on speaker. He called the director of a medical foundation that funded surgical care in Central America. "This is Steve Harvey. I'm standing on the stage of Family Feud with a woman named Adriana Velasquez. Her mother, Yolanda, is in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, in stage 4 kidney failure. She needs a transplant. The surgery costs $62,000. The family has been denied loans 3 times. I'm going to personally fund the entire procedure. The surgery, the testing, the medications, every dollar. And I need your foundation to coordinate the surgical team and post-operative care. Can we do this?" The director said yes, without hesitation. But Steve wasn't done. He looked at Adriana. "There's one more thing." He dialed a second number. The phone rang 3 times. A woman's voice answered, thin, tired, the voice of a woman on dialysis who hadn't slept well in months. "Bueno?" "Yolanda," Steve said through a translator, "this is Steve Harvey. I'm calling you from the Family Feud stage. Your daughter Adriana is here. And ma'am, I need you to listen carefully. Your son Raphael is standing next to her." The sound that came through the speaker was in Spanish. It was a mother saying her son's name. "Raphael, Raphael, mi hijo, Raphael." Over and over, each time more broken than the last, each time closer to something that was either prayer or collapse or both. Adriana was holding the phone. Raphael had his forehead pressed against his sister's shoulder. The audience was standing. Nobody had told them to stand. They just stood. Steve turned to the Morrison family, the family that had lost. He looked at Brenda Morrison, the matriarch. "Ma'am, tell me what you see." Brenda Morrison didn't walk across the stage. She ran. 63 years old, and she ran. She grabbed Adriana and Raphael together, one in each arm, a stranger holding 2 people she'd met an hour ago, and she said, "God doesn't lose people. He just takes his time." Steve gave the Morrison family their own $20,000 prize. Both families stood together on that stage while the audience clapped for over 4 minutes. Steve looked into the camera. "Everyone watching at home, somewhere tonight, someone you love is missing. Not dead, not gone, missing. And the world has told you to move on, to accept it, to stop saying their name. I am telling you right now, don't stop. Don't ever stop. Say their name, light the candle, keep the cross. Because the silence you've been talking into, it's not empty. Someone on the other side is wearing a blue shirt on Sundays, and they don't know why. And the reason is you." The clip was uploaded that night. It reached 240 million views in 40 hours. Within 2 weeks, it crossed 430 million. The hashtag #SayTheirName trended in 56 countries. The International Committee of the Red Cross reported a 31% increase in tracing requests in the 60 days following the episode. 12 families in Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador were reunited with missing relatives through the ICRC's tracing network in the 3 months after the broadcast. Cases that had been dormant in regional databases for years reopened because a caseworker saw the clip and went back to check. The Say Their Name Foundation was incorporated in August 2024. In its first year, it funded the digitization of over 40,000 missing migrant case files across Mexico and Central America, converting paper records into searchable digital entries in a consolidated database. It partnered with the ICRC, the Mexican Red Cross, and 7 non-governmental organizations to create a cross-border matching system that compared open tracing requests against hospital admissions, shelter records, and church registries across the migration corridor. By the end of the second year, the foundation had directly contributed to the location of over 170 missing migrants, people who had been classified as status unknown for an average of 14 years. Yolanda Velázquez received her kidney transplant at Hospital Escuela in Tegucigalpa on September 3, 2024. The donor was Carlos, her oldest son, who had been tested and matched within weeks of the surgery being funded. The procedure took 6 hours. Yolanda recovered in a room with a window facing east. When she opened her eyes, Rafael was sitting beside her bed. He had traveled from Mexico to Honduras for the first time in 22 years on a temporary humanitarian travel document arranged by the Foundation's legal team. He was holding her hand. She looked at him for a long time without speaking. Then she said, "You look like your father." Rafael said, "Everyone says that." Yolanda said, "Your father never came back either, but you did." Steve Harvey spoke about the Velázquez family in an interview 16 months after the episode. He said, "I've done this show for a very long time. I have seen people win and I have seen people break. But I have never stood on a stage and watched silence end." That's what happened. 22 years of silence. A sister saying a name into a room. A brother wearing a color he couldn't explain. And then one moment on a stage and the silence just ended. I didn't do that. A woman named Delia, who works at a Holiday Inn in Bakersfield, did that. She wrote a letter. That's all it took. One person who listened and one letter. Rafael Velázquez still lives in San Juan Bautista, Tuxtepec, Mexico. He still works at the lumber yard. His memory has not fully returned and likely never will. He remembers the hillside. He remembers the path. He remembers a kitchen in the dark and a girl's hand and a cross pressed into a palm. He does not remember the freight truck or the injury or the 3 weeks in the hospital. The doctors in Oaxaca told him that some memories protect themselves by staying gone. He has accepted that. He calls Adriana every Sunday evening. She calls him every Wednesday. They don't always talk about important things. Sometimes they talk about the weather. Sometimes they talk about food. Sometimes they just breathe on the line, and neither hangs up because the sound of another person not hanging up is, after 22 years of silence, the most beautiful sound in the world. Adriana Velázquez still works at the Holiday Inn on Buck Owens Boulevard in Bakersfield. She makes $15.10 an hour now. She still wears the silver cross. She still carries the photograph, though the fold lines don't matter anymore because she has new photographs. Rafael, in his blue shirt, standing next to a lumber pile, squinting in the Oaxacan sun, looking almost exactly like their father. She keeps both, the old one and the new. She keeps them in the same wallet fold, face to face, so the brother she remembered and the brother she found are always looking at each other. Every year on June 14th, Adriana still lights a candle. She no longer says Raphael's name into silence. She calls him. He picks up. She says, "I'm lighting the candle." He says, "I know." Neither of them blows it out. They let it burn until it goes out on its own, the way things do when they've given everything they have. A girl stands in a doorway watching a dark path. A man walks down a hillside and disappears around a bend. 22 years pass. The candle stays lit. The cross stays on. The name keeps getting said, into rooms, into phones, into the silence between continents. And then one day, on a stage neither of them ever imagined standing on, the bend in the path straightens out, and the man is there again, wearing the same color blue. And the girl is not a girl anymore, but she is still reaching, still holding what he gave her, still saying his name like a spell that finally, after all this time, worked. If this story reminded you that some things are worth waiting for, subscribe and turn on notifications. We find the moments that prove the silence isn't permanent.